Alright guys, for week 4, lesson 1, we're going to be reviewing what we learned about equivalent fractions. So whenever we're trying to find an equivalent fraction, we know that we either have to multiply the numerator and denominator by the same number, or we have to divide the numerator and the denominator by the same number. So, if two fractions name the same amount, they are called equivalent fractions. And our learning objective for today is, today I can identify, or I will learn how to identify equivalent fractions. So we'll go ahead and start with the first example. We'll do 1/4 is equal to blank over 8. Okay? Well, if we know that we have to get to 8 from 4, what do we have to multiply 4 by to get 8? 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. So, if we're doing an equivalent fraction, we know that we have to multiply or either divide, in this case we're multiplying, the same number by the numerator and the denominator. Well, since we multiply 4 by 2, we have to multiply 1 by 2. 1 times 2 equals 2. So an equivalent fraction to 1/4 is 2/8. Now we'll do our next example. 9/12 equal to blank over 4. So, in this case, what are we doing? Are we multiplying or are we dividing? Well, if we're going from bigger to smaller, we know that we're dividing. So, what number can we divide by 12 to get 4? 12 divided by 1 is 12. 12 divided by 2 is 6. 12 divided by 3 is 4. So, we know that we're going to be dividing by 3. What we do to the denominator, we have to do to the numerator. So we know we're going to have to divide this 9 by 3 also. 9 divided by 3 is 3. Because if you go backwards, you can say 4 times 3 equals 12. And then 3 times 3 equals 9. Our next example. 2/3 is equal to blank over 6. Alright? So, if we're going from smaller to bigger, what are we going to do? We're going to multiply. Well, what can we multiply 3 by to equal 6? 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 2 equals 6. So, it's going to be times 2. We know we're going to have to do the same up here. 2 times 2 equals 4. So an equivalent fraction to 2/3 is 4/6. Now we'll do 4/5 is equal to blank 10. We're going from smaller to bigger, smaller to larger. So what are we going to do? We're going to be multiplying. 5 times what equals 10? 5 times 1 equals 5. 5 times 2 equals 10. What we do to the denominator, we have to do to the numerator. 4 times 2 is 8. So an equivalent fraction to 4/5 is 8/10. Now what if I gave you this fraction and I told you to multiply to find an equivalent fraction? Well, we could multiply by anything, couldn't we, to find an equivalent fraction? As long as we multiply the same number by the numerator and the denominator. So I could say times 2 equals 2/8. 1 times 2 is 2. 4 times 2 is 8. I could also say 1/4. Let's do times 3. That would be 1 times 3 is 3. 4 times 3 is 12. So an equivalent fraction to 1/4 is 3/12 or 2/8. Well, what if I done 1/4 times 6? 1 times 6 equals 6. 4 times 6 equals 24. An equivalent fraction to 1/4 is also 6/24. Now what if I gave you this, 4/8, and I ask you to find an equivalent fraction by dividing. So we have to find a number that we can divide both by 8 and 4. So I'm going to go with, let's think about that for a minute. What do you think it is? I think that it's going to be 2. I need to give y'all time to answer also at home. So 4 divided by 2 would be 2. 8 divided by 2 would be 4. What about if I gave you 2/6? What could we divide by? We could also divide by 2, because can't 2 go into 2 and 2 also go into 6? Yes. 2 divided by 2. 2 is 1. Excuse me. And 6 divided by 2 is 3. Alright. What if I gave you this? 2/14 and then 3/7. And I want to ask you, is that equivalent? Is that equivalent? What are we going to do? Well, we know that, let's look at our denominators. In order to go from 14 to 17, we know that we're dividing. What can you divide 14 by to get 7? 2. 14 divided by 2 equals 7. Now, if we're doing equivalent, we know we have to do the same thing to the denominator and the numerator. So since we divided by 2 down here, we have to divide by 2 up here. Now, 2 divided by 2 would be 1, not 3. So they are not equal. So I think that's enough problems to review together. I think hopefully maybe your memory of how we found equivalent fractions is coming back to you. And I have an assignment box posted for lesson 1 for week 4. I want you to go ahead and complete that worksheet, take a picture of it, and upload it into the assignment box, and you're through with lesson 1.